Yeah. Got it.
Good evening, Richard Kilshaw. Could you please confirm to us that you can hear us via the microphones? Thank you.
Hello, yeah, I can hear you.
Apologies for that. Could you just please confirm again, Mr. Kilshaw?
Yes, I can hear you. Thank you.
That's great. Thank you very much. Good afternoon, Chris Pickett. Could we please confirm that you can hear us via the Zoom link?
Hello, I can hear you.
Mr. Pickett, could you just please do that? Please say something again, as we didn't quite hear what you said.
Hi, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Hello? Can you hear me?
Okay, Mr. Piggott, can you please confirm that you can hear us again?
Hello, I can hear you.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much. Right. Mr. Kilshaw, can we just confirm that we can hear you again as well, just before we start?
Hello, yes, I can hear you. I hope you can hear me.
Thank you very much.
Please be upstanding for His Worshipful, the Mayor of Colchester, Councillor Tim Young.
Good evening, everyone. Hello and welcome to this special full council meeting of Colchester Borough Council. I'm Councillor Tim Young, the Mayor of the Borough of Colchester, and I will be chairing tonight's meeting. The meeting is being broadcast live over the internet on the council's YouTube channel and will also be available to watch afterwards. To begin, there are a few, as ever, housekeeping matters. Should the alarm sound, please evacuate using the nearest emergency exit and assemble at the car park at the rear of the town hall. If necessary, it may well be necessary, we will look to have breaks at approximately 90 minutes intervals and there are toilets on every floor of the town hall. Can I invite Sister Diana from the Canonesses of the Holy Sepulchre to lead us in prayer?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and good evening. Let us pray. As we meet together for this full council meeting, we thank you for giving us the gifts and skills which we may use in the service of this great borough. Please guide us through your Holy Spirit so that wise and informed decisions are made for the benefit of our community this evening. Help us to discuss the issues before us with courtesy, truth, and mutual respect. And grant that all who are the representative of this community and its people will seek to serve the common good through him who came not to be served, but to serve, Jesus Christ our Lord. We pray for those who are still affected adversely from the pandemic, and for those who are still ill due to COVID. We give thanks for the vaccine programme in the borough and for all those involved in keeping us safe and well. We pray for all who serve the community in various departments and areas, that all will be valued and encouraged. We give thanks for our Mayor, Councillor Tim Young, and all the members of this council. Please bless them in all that they do, in and for the borough. Amen. Yesterday was a service at St Andrew's Church, the Mayor's Civic Service, and I filched one of the prayers which I thought was appropriate from that. In darkness and light, in trouble and joy, help us, Heavenly Father, to trust in your love, to serve your purpose, and praise your name through Christ our Lord. Amen. Thank you.
Thank you, Diana. If you'd like to take your seats. Diana has to leave us, but thank you very much indeed for leading us in prayer. Right, before we continue with the agenda, we have a number of apologies. I make it 11. So I'll just tell you, we've had apologies from councillors Barber, Bentley, Buston, Chapman, Coleman, Ellis, Hagan, Luxford Vaughan, Beverley Oxford, Gerard Oxford, and Robert Davidson. Okay, we'll move on immediately to item 2, which is Have Your Say. We have extended the Have Your Say this evening to 30 minutes rather than 15. And I have a number of speakers. I don't think we'll be able to fit in any more than the ones I've got on my list. And to let you all know, you will have 3 minutes. A bell will ring after 2, and then another one after 3 when you must conclude. There will not be any responses because the responses will be wrapped up in the debate that we have this evening. So can I call our first Have Your Say speaker, please, Beryl Cox, if you'd like to come forward. Good evening, Beryl. When you're ready, press the microphone, the grey button, and your time will begin. Thank you.
Middlewick as a wildlife site with over 600 species of insect, animals and birds, many of which are both rare and endangered, should never have been included in the plan in the first place. There is also the extremely rare acid grassland on the site. Colchester Borough Council have exceeded their target for housing And since the local plan was initially drawn up, other development brownfield sites have become available, which could and should be used instead of Middlewick. Yes, it will mean extra effort to scrap the local plan and remove Middlewick from it, but it could and should be done. You should not take the easy option and rubber stamp it. This area of Middlewick is the oasis of green space for the estates that surround it. Apart from anything else, the additional traffic from 1,000 houses will hemorrhage onto roads which have the highest pollution measurements in the town. The Wick has been shamefully used as a political football from the start, with each party blaming the other and taking no responsibility. Come on, councillors, you all say you do not want this, and indeed all parties have put this statement into print. You all say that you do not want Middlewick developed, as it is an important ecological site and should not be destroyed. So don't do it. You have the power to stop this and act upon the wishes of the residents who have voted you into office. The Colchester Declaration 2019, where the pledge for nature was to protect what remains and recover what has been lost. Were they just words at that time? There is a solution, so stop making excuses, please. Do not become the people who destroy this site and the wildlife who live there. If you do, you will deprive this and future generations of this amazing and peaceful place. Could you live with yourselves? Finally, as I urge you to do the right thing, don't even think about abstaining from this vote, because to do nothing is to consent.
Thank you, Mrs. Cox. Thank you very much indeed. Our next speaker is Dave Smith, please. Evening, Dave. You have 3 minutes, and press the grey button when you're ready and the time will start. Grey button at the bottom, that's it.
Tonight, 51 councillors, well it was 51, it's now 41, elected by the people of Colchester will be casting what will go down as a historical vote. As I see it, you've got two choices. One is the right thing to do and reject this plan. At last month's committee vote, which I listened to on the stream, I was gobsmacked to hear some of Colchester's councillors saying they knew it was wrong, but as it was the only option on the table, they voted for it. This can't be right. If something is wrong, it's wrong. Don't make a big mistake and agree to 1,000 houses on a site that is not suitable. The road network in this part of Colchester can't handle the extra cars 1,000 houses will bring. And as others have said, the area has been untouched for many years, not spoilt by development, and it's important to establish wildlife. Your second choice, which it looks like a lot of people are going to do, is play the political game, toe the party line and vote for something that's wrong. But don't forget, it was the people who put you where you are now, and come the next election, it's the people who can put you out of where you are now. Tonight's vote in years to come will go down in the history books. I hope the majority of the 51 councillors are shown to be good people that serve the people that elected them into office. I ask you, please do the right thing and vote against the 1,000 houses on the Middlewick site. And let's hope that tonight's vote, very important to all the people of Colchester, is one where we can actually see who has voted for what, so that we can decide what we're doing with our vote next time round. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Dave. Thank you very much. Councillor McLean, Jackie McLean, I think I heard your phone go off, so that's a £20 donation to the Mayor's Charities. Thanks very much. Next speaker is Mr. Steve Kelly. Is Mr. Kelly here? No, it doesn't look as though he is. If he does turn up within the 30 minutes, then I will allow him to speak. So we'll move on to the next speaker, which is Sir Bob Russell. Sir Bob, I don't have to tell you the score. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, 99% of the wildflower meadows in Essex have been lost since the Second World War. I repeat that, 99%. Colchester Borough Council should be doing all it can to protect and preserve what is left, not stick 1,000 houses on Middlewick. There have been several opportunities over the last 5 years, had the political will been there, for Middlewick to be saved. There's a lot of scaremongering going on, that's for certain. One important fact is that all the army land between Abbots Road and Weir Lane is not before you tonight. It's been cut in 2 halves. And you may wonder why that is. There's the red half and the blue half. The red half is where the 1,000 houses are going. The blue half, the army say they want to keep for military training purposes. I suggest they're telling a fib. My Freedom of Information Act requests to the Ministry of Defence have confirmed that only firing has been done on Middlewick, nothing else. So if they're not using it for military purposes now, why would they do it after they shut the firing range? And the answer is quite simple. They wanted 2,000 houses to start with. The Borough Council said you can have 1,000. They couldn't believe their luck. Whereas in fact, what should have happened is the council should have said no, because the ecological importance of Middlewick is such that it should not be lost. We do not want to have an urban sprawl, a coalescence from Monkwick to Old Heath. Even if there was a year's delay in sorting out removal of Middlewick, this time next year, Colchester Borough Council would still be well ahead of most other planning authorities with its local plan. I have a question to Councillors King, Fox and Laws. Can you tell me whether respectively Liberal Democrat, Labour and Conservative councillors have been instructed to vote yes this evening? Can we have a named vote? I'm astonished that it's such an important meeting. For the first time I've ever noticed this, 20% of the elected representatives of the people are not here. Last autumn, the Prime Minister, who we know always tells the truth, said that there would be no housing built by his government on greenfields. This was a get out of jail card for the council. It didn't do it. Mr. Mayor, if the political will is there, as it was years ago with Highwoods, councillors do not have to approve it this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Sir Bob. Just to clear up the named vote issue, a named vote can be called if a member of the council proposes it and it is supported by 2 other councillors. So that will come later. The next speaker on Have You Say is Richard Martin, please. Mr. Martin, you have 3 minutes. And as soon as you press that grey button, your 3 minutes will begin. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and your councillors for your time tonight. I'm reading this on behalf of Save the Middlewick Group and its legal representatives. The local plan is going to be adopted today. It shouldn't be. It is simply not consistent with our commitments at a local or national level to adopt policy SC2, which will develop Middlewick Ranges into housing. All local authorities in the United Kingdom are now reckoning with how to best to protect the environment, with biodiversity in particular a requirement that development should improve with development. Gives us as constituents the means to achieve this shared aim. It is clear that the land at Middlewick should not have been allocated for development. It was not properly consulted on prior to its initial inclusion, and that alone should have been sufficient to exclude the site from the plan at an earlier stage. More importantly, Middlewick contains acid grassland, a habitat so rare that even in dry and terse language used to categorise and quantify biodiversity, it is deemed irreplaceable. Despite the the import of this language of irreplaceability, the land prioritises speculative mechanisms to restore this habitat by inject it with acidic compounds. The underlying assumption that this is largely untested method is supposed to achieve with less than 20 years. Wholesale restoration of a habitat that likely took at least 5 times as long to create. It cannot be rational to proceed with this in mind. The principle is clear. If a habitat is irreplaceable, then there is interest in development, either a novel mechanism for replicating the habitat must be evidenced, or development should not proceed at all. We are, without reservation, of the latter view, and the land should remain as it is. However, we take note of the inspector's modifications, particularly the requirement through master planning that a binding agreement between the council and developer should be in place for at least 30 years from the commencement of development. This is an opportunity for the council to make good on its environmental commitments and show that our evaluation of the environment is more than just symbolic. As if widely expected, the developer cannot actually recreate the irreplaceable, the council must take action to enforce this agreement. The core provisions of this agreement should be so that the environmental interests of current residents and future generations can be adequately protected. And one last thing is, we believe that Natural England have made representations to the council planning department, and that the Middlewick should be delayed until further ecological evidence that has been provided should be properly evaluated. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. I believe Councillor Gospel addressed the Natural England point when he comes to speak. Our next speaker is via Zoom, and that is Chris Piggott.
Hello, can you hear me?
Mr. Piggott, you have 3 minutes, and as soon as you start speaking, the timing will begin. Thank you.
Okay, good evening. Thank you, Mr. Mayor, and thank you, councillors. I would like to start by saying it probably comes as no surprise that I'm here to speak tonight about the proposed development on Middlewick. I've consistently been against this proposal, and I'm saddened that we're now potentially at a state where it's no return. I planned to speak at the recent planning committee, and but sadly missed out on that opportunity because in my absence, it wasn't allowed to be read out. Much of the points I wanted to read today is what I wanted to discuss on that meeting. In recent days and weeks, I've spoken to a few of you about my opinions on this. I'm also may differ politically. I would hope that it's always we want is the best green space for Middlewick. Many of you have either publicly said, printed or campaigned against this. So I will be expecting you to vote to get this later on today. This is a massive decision for Colchester, something that you've all been responsible for now. It is the proposed goes forward tonight, then it will be because of you. Excuse me, I've lost my train of thought. If this proposal goes forward tonight, it will be because enough of you in here have voted it through. It is literally in your hands. Please do not use this meeting as a political football match and blame the government or the MP for this issue. They do not control the council and they have nothing to do with it, and fundamentally it isn't productive. 1,000 homes on rare Attic grassland, an area that is rich in biodiversity, and once it's gone, it's gone. There is a reason why so much of this site is rare, because the conditions have to be right. One can simply not recreate that. This council, many of whom are the same elected members that only called a climate emergency a few years ago. How is the destruction of 40% of Middlewick taking this pledge seriously? I urge you all, please stop this now. Do not adopt Section 2. Thank you. Save the Wick.
Thank you, Mr. Piggott. Our next speaker, I think, is in the hall, and it's Andrew Wilkinson. Mr. Wilkinson, please. Mr. Wilkinson, you have 3 minutes. And Jonathan will show you which grey button to push. And as soon as you do, the 3 minutes will begin. Thank you.
As many of you will know, I have emailed all councillors and Karen Sara to document today that answers many, though not all of the questions councillors have asked us. I also acknowledge there are councillors who don't care about the ecology or environmental factors and just want houses built on Middlewick. There are also those who believe Middlewick in the local plan provides protection and there are those who want to preserve Middlewick. I reiterate some of the points made in that communication today for the record. I'm sure everyone here wants to adopt a local plan. The only point of contention seems to be the inclusion of Middlewick within it. Why are you having this meeting to adopt a local plan today? You do not have to adopt it until the end of 2023. Many other councils throughout the country have decided to wait until that date. If it is because you think speculative development is likely to take place now, what speculative developments have you currently received? Are the neighbourhood plans up to date and adopted? As you have managed to call this adoption meeting within 3 weeks, surely this is enough time to adopt the plan and prevent speculative development before any developer can go to an appeal, should that prove necessary. And what developer would risk that when you have a local plan ready to be adopted at short notice? We need to get our heads around the housing target figure, which is now, according to Karen, 1,086. The fact that the local plan is based on 920 is irrelevant. That figure no longer applies to the delivery of housing. I will, however, let Karen confirm that. We have to deliver 1,086 houses with effect from 2019-20. NIMBYism. This has been brought up in several meetings. We need to get our heads around that as well. No one wants development near them, and I can understand that. But a few ecologically dead farm fields are not as important as Middlewick Ranges, both ecologically and as an open green space for 5 housing estates. People from all over Colchester and beyond are objecting to this development on the Wick. Most of the speakers at the Have Your Say sessions don't even live near the Wick, but its importance is recognised by them. And if a site is important and with as many constraints as the Wick gets built on, what chance do you have of protecting farm fields around your villages in the future? The precedent will have been set. For all of these reasons and more, you should cancel this meeting tonight and reschedule. You're not in possession of all the facts. If this meeting is not to be cancelled, then reject it, as the potential speculative development is preferable to building on the Wick. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wilkinson. The next speaker up on the list is Grace Dark. Is Grace in the room? Okay, thank you. She's sending her apologies. So we'll move on to the next speaker, which is Mr. Alan Short, please. Mr. Short, you have 3 minutes, and a bell will ring after 2 and again after 3. Press the grey button and your time will begin, please.
Good evening. I moved into my current home 47 years ago. I complained bitterly on mornings like this morning to be woken by this huge song at dawn. We had hedgehogs in the garden. I could listen to thrushes breaking shells and eating our snails. We had, as I say, hedgehogs. We had thrushes. We had swifts at dusk. We had house martins. We had stag beetles. We had a whole range of wildlife. Even squirrels, even grey squirrels, and they've all gone. We've done our best. We had built a pond, flowers that attract insects, and yet even the sparrows that nest every year in our holly tree have gone. What we're facing is an existential threat to our existence as a planet and to the existence of the species that are on it. I give money to organisations fighting to save the rainforests all over the world. The Wick is our rainforest. We are going to give 40% of it away and risk the remaining, because believe you me, any developer will know that once you start building on a place like this, it'll be much easier. My girlfriend used to always tell me it was easier to do it the second time. That the history is littered with this. I cannot find anybody who wants to build on the Wick. Nobody's actually said, oh, that's a good idea, let's build a load of houses there. So the plan is we're going to get the MOD to not sell the site. So what do? We write them a letter. we enhance the value of the land by letting them have 1,000 houses there, and with certainty that the developers who buy it will expect to get more. What we need to do is we need to throw out this part of the local plan, and we need the council to lead the citizens of Colchester in a campaign to save the Wick. If we did that, we would embarrass the Ministry of Defence, because they rely on the people of Colchester for the support that we give them as a garrison. So if you want to save the Wick, throw this out and start leading the rest of us in a campaign to stop any building at all on the Wick. Remember what it says in the song, don't it always go to know that you don't know what you've lost till it's gone. This is about to go. Do the right thing.
Thank you, Mr. Shaw. Our next speaker is again on Zoom, and it's Richard Kilshaw.
Hello. Hello.
Hello, Mr. Kilshaw. You have 3 minutes, and it will begin as soon as you start speaking. Thank you.
Thanks for accommodating me on Zoom as I've got COVID. I have a degree in conservation management, biological survey, and I'm a full member of the Chartered Institute of Ecology and Environmental Management. I've made several presentations about Middlewick, detailing how the MOD's ecology report undervalues the site and how their proposed habitat creation scheme will not adequately compensate for the loss of priority habitats. But I've yet to receive any satisfactory explanations. However, a DEFRA Commission study published in June 2022 may shed some light, as it shows the level of resource, capacity and expertise within local authorities is not adequate to deal with the existing planning workload and the increase required for biodiversity net gain. Produced by the Association of Local Government Ecologists, this report found 192 local planning authorities, 57% of the total in England. Of them, only 5% thought their current ecological expertise was adequate to scrutinise applications affecting biodiversity, and only 10% thought adequate to deliver biodiversity net gain. So I ask, did Colchester Borough Council take part in this study, and how did it fare? Have councillors and advising officers read the details of the MOD ecology report and understood the significance of the survey limitations stated within it? Have you read the details in the proposed habitat compensation scheme, the RSPB Minsmere example they use? And why is the mitigation hierarchy being ignored? Let me remind you that paragraph 175 of the National Plan and Policy Framework states, if significant harm to biodiversity resulting from a development cannot be avoided, adequately mitigated, or as a last resort, compensated for, then planning permission should be refused. Excuse me. Finally, we are told that 60% of the site will remain open green space. However, this will be fragmented into at least two parts. Beneath the pylons at Abbots Road, where you can't build, and the area south of the development. So it will be far more damaging than this figure suggests, especially when you factor in the impact the extra 2,000 to 3,000 people and the estimated 700 cats and dogs that 1,000 houses will have on the remaining open space and wildlife. If adopted, hopefully the conditions applied by the inspector will make it virtually unworkable for developers. And rest assured, we will follow applications closely and publicise any deviation from those conditions and do our best to ensure they are upheld, as I'm sure will you. Middlewick must be removed from the local plan. Thank you. I'll be happy to go into further details, answer questions, or provide the reference for that report.
Thank you, Mr. Kilshaw. That's your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Can I ask if Mr. Steve Kelly has arrived? Any sign of Mr. Steve Kelly? No, he'll have to come off the list then. And our final speaker under Have Your Say will be Mr. William Jolliffe. Mr. Jolliffe, please. You have 3 minutes, Mr. Jolliffe. and we'll start as soon as you press the grey button and start speaking. Thank you.
Good evening, everybody. Before I start, a few people around this table stood and looked at Middlewick today. It was absolutely glorious and beautiful, and I can't honestly think in your right mind how you would think about concreting this delightful area that's always been there for everybody to enjoy. Right, now, Councillor Paul Dundas says this is Colchester Council's most important decision for 20 years. I go further. It's the most important one in the council's history. Why? Because historic Middlewick is up for development. Why, oh, why did you councillors agree to Local Plan 2 5 years ago? You know Wick was on it. Now I know none of you want Wick built on. You don't seem to have the guts to say a firm no to Plan 2. Then Middlewick remains a free, delightful, tranquil site for all Old Heath and beyond locals to enjoy. It's glorious open space in the heart of Colchester. Shame on the lot of you if you concrete it. And Karen Sirrett, no, MOD would not go to nearest developer to ask for thousands more houses. They would lawfully abide a no to Local Plan 2. For God's sake, we still live in a democratic society. Times MOD is a force for democracy. If Karen, as you say, is true, then add democratic rights that all those brave servicemen trained on Wick for is nonsense. But Karen, perhaps you personally want Middlewick...
Mr. Jolliffe, if you could not direct your remarks to a council officer who has no right of reply, please, then I'll have to rule your submission. If you, I could have to rule your submission out of order. So if you could direct it to the councillors, please.
Yeah. The non-local Bristol inspectors couldn't care less about our Wick. It's all money to them, utter greed. Going on, I've lived on Mersey Road all my 69 years. The traffic here can't cope now. What about the Abbots Road Old Heath Junction? It's chaotic now. Lorries use it as a rat run to get to A12. Surely Essex County Council Chelmsford would refuse that, but no, it's all money and greed to them. So, councillors, this is your last chance to vote on this crazy Local Plan 2 out now. Finally, I'm very sorry our Member of Parliament, Will Quince, is not here to put his case. He keeps telling everyone he doesn't want Middlewick built on. Sorry to say it, but perhaps he doesn't want to speak up for government's proposals when it finally matters. So here's hoping, God save our Wick. To concrete it would be a crime against nature and the future of peace of minds. Many folks don't have a garden like mine. Middlewick is their only solace for their peace of mind. So finally again, councillors, do you really want to be the council that destroyed Middlewick? Surely you don't.
Thank you, Mr. Jolliffe.
Thank you.
Okay, that is all the have your say speakers. So we'll move on to item 3. Declarations of interest. The monitoring officer says he's had none, and I did ask you all to give them in advance to him if you had any. So we'll move on to item 4, Colchester Local Plan, section 2, adoption. And I will ask Councillor Martin Goss, as chair of the Local Plan Committee, to move motion A. Martin, you have up to 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mayor. I move that the recommendation contained in draft minute 239 of the Local Plan Committee meeting of the 13th of June be approved and adopted. Councillors, this evening we need to properly debate and understand the decision that we are making. The local plan is a process that all councils have to go through to provide housing sites and allocations for the next 15 years. The Local Plan Committee is not a direct function of Cabinet. It's actually a subset of full council, hence why we are making the decision here this evening. Colchester has built on average 830 houses per annum for over 50 years, with some of the highest house building taking place in the 1970s. To be absolutely crystal clear, current housing targets in our local plan are set at 920 not 1,086. This is what the planning inspector has agreed and has signed off. That is what we are expected to build on average for the next 15 years, unless it gets amended. The WIC has dominated the local plan part 2 debate. And in fact, there's much more to the second part of the local plan, including updating all of our policies. And this never actually gets spoken about. And I'll come back to the WIC in a moment, because it is, of course, an important part tonight. We are actually looking to update 63 policies in part 2 and replace them with 81 new policies or updated policies. That's actually part of what we're adopting tonight, and we mustn't lose sight of that. The sites are one part, the policies are another. In part 1 of the local plan that we adopted, there are 9 policies in there, which brings a total of 90 policies that will govern the local plan and the planning policy process that's governed by the local, Planning Act and the National Planning Policy Framework. That underpins future decisions, including what may happen at Middlewick in the future. And it's important that people understand that. As part of the policy changes, there will be new policies that actually come forwards. And this includes policy CC1, which is climate change. And this includes updates to ensure that there is more tree canopy cover, and at least 10% of that covers all new sites. That is new within part 2 of the plan. There is also new generic infrastructure and mitigation requirements within the policies, which takes a much more holistic borough-wide view, which is what we've been calling for. It also includes updates for Colchester Zoo, and it also includes updates to affordable housing, taking us from 20% to 30%, which means all developments have to deliver that. And again, those are important salient points we need to remember tonight when debating this. It also includes updates to the overall open space on developments, ensuring that they have usable open space of 10%, not bits of land pulled together that make up 10% that are unusable. They are some of the major changes in the policies. But let's move to Middlewick. It absolutely dominated the local plan meeting, quite rightly, back in June, and there were pretty much 3 hours of debate about it. But the facts are that originally the MOD wanted 2,000 houses, and so Bob Russell did FOI requests that produced that documentation. That was what the MOD approached Colchester with. And through the process, we've landed at 1,000 houses. The process has been going on for years. It's been examined in public by the planning inspector. The planning inspector has taken longer to deliberate over this plan, to certainly look at Middlewick in depth, and has come back and has recommended that we adopt the plan. Although has also, in my opinion, put in place very deep and diverse and legally binding conditions on Middlewick to ensure that all of those are met. And if planning applications go in and they do not meet those conditions, we have to and will reject those plans. It's written in to the inspector's report. To move briefly, because I only have 5 minutes and I could probably talk on this for 15, just to make reference to the letter that came in recently from Natural England. In summary, what they were saying was it refers to the authority having full regard to the range of ecological information that's being presented by third parties, which highlights the biodiversity importance of the site, highlights the modifications that I've spoken about from the inspector regarding the site are welcomed, and they may result in a situation where delivery of the development of the site may be challenging. And I've referenced that point tonight.
Thank you, Councillor Goss. You'll get 3 minutes to sum up at the end if you want to refer further to that important letter. Thank you. Can I see indications from councillors that wish to speak tonight, please? I'll just let Mr. Weavers take a note of your names. Keep your hands up while Mr. Weavers writes them down. I thought there'd be quite a few. So we'll just hang on while Mr. Weavers takes note. That's not to say I can't bring others in later, but I just wanted to see an initial group. And he'll write them down in a random order. There will be no just as he sees them, probably from both sides of the room. Have you got them all? Could you put your hands down? Okay, as I say, we'll go through the list. If Mr. Weavers didn't spot your hand, you will have an opportunity later. First speaker I've got is Councillor Sue Lissamore. Sue, please.
Okay, thank you. This meeting should not have been shoehorned in tonight. There are a number of absences which can be helped, because if we'd had the meeting at one of our scheduled meeting dates, it would have been in our diaries a long time ago. I've thought long and hard about this local plan for months, and I want to take this opportunity to thank our leader, Darius, because tonight we are not whipped. The Conservative group are not whipped. So each Conservative member can vote for what they believe will work from the perspective of their own feelings and the feelings of the residents of their own wards. I've sat back and thought, what is best for Prittygate? I've discussed this with Councillor Lou Tate and my colleague, Councillor Roger Buston, who is unfortunately at a funeral today and cannot be here. To be honest, Prittygate has very little land in the plan because we're already completely full. But other areas aren't. Other areas like the Wick. I know the complexities of this issue. I know the risk we leave ourselves if we have no plan. But for the memories I have of playing with my children, for my mother-in-law who grew up playing on it, for older generations who grew up with this site, I cannot vote for a plan that includes the Wick. I cannot vote for a plan which builds on such an ecologically important site. I cannot vote for a plan which increases traffic up Mersey Road to the bottleneck of St Botolph's roundabout. I sat today on the Essex Climate Commission meeting on behalf of Essex County Council, and for everything that was, has and will be discussed as important to our and our children and our grandchildren's future. For environmental reasons, I cannot vote for this plan, and for the Wick, I will vote against. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lissamore. Next speaker is Councillor Mark Corey. Mark.
Thank you, Mayor. This is not an easy decision, and voting yes or no is not easy either. There are positives and negatives both sides, but it remains a binary choice. Sadly, we've found no other solution through this process. And I must admit, I don't like having a binary choice, and I do think that's a fault of the local plan system. When we voted on part 1 of the local plan, I also made the same points, that the local plan process remains flawed and unwieldy, and councils and councillors up and down the country face problems getting through a local plan. The wider planning system remains too much in favour of development, in my opinion, and isn't yet in the 21st century when looking at truly sustainable development. This plan does take steps, as Councillor Goss outlined, to move forward on better environmental protections and blueprints for more sustainable development. But without radical steps from the government, we aren't going to move forward on our planning system, and we remain stuck with this binary choice this evening. I thank officers and councillors across the board who have worked on this plan over the years that it has been developing. Furthermore, the government and the Ministry of Defence's drive to sell Middlewick gives us this impossible decision. I will happily stand with any other councillor going forward to try and reverse that decision and to protect Middlewick going forward. Middlewick is not in my ward, but I understand the sensitivities of it and the importance of it to Colchester. We need to protect our environment, and that is why we have passed a climate emergency. But again, we need radical change in our system in order to properly be able to protect our ecology. Faced with the binary choice this evening and taking on board the inspector's in-depth modifications and work on Middlewick, I feel sadly the best or least worst option would be to vote through the plan with the protections that are in place and work to not see the site developed, rather than having no protections at all. I actually welcome the points made by Richard Kilshaw this evening and would like to work with him further about the limitations of the site and how we can protect it. But a plan that protects all of Colchester is better than none. We've seen that recently in Wivenhoe with our neighbourhood plan standing up against development, but it needs to be supported by a local plan in the background. And we refer to that when going against a planning application from a large developer. We don't want to see speculative development. We want a plan that will support all of Colchester's natural sites. And I want to protect Middlewick. This may be the best way and sadly the least worst option this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Corey. Next councillor is Councillor Darius Lawrence, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Our group, the largest group here, were unhappy about this meeting because we believed that our diaries were scheduled for meetings set in stone, and that is why many of our members have not been able to be here this evening. I've long struggled with the basic concept that this place sorts out housing and another place sorts out transport infrastructure, and quite frankly, local government reform is long overdue to address that. And I'm told that a local plan can be a powerful tool in protecting communities who have distinct identities from unwanted, bland, predatory behaviour. And I've obviously read all of the paperwork, and I can see some really good stuff in here, which Councillor Goss did touch on. For example, heritage assets are being afforded protection, not just listed buildings. That's a great step forward. Explicit references to a desire for transport modal shift, particularly in the urban area. Great stuff there, and we're making provision for it, aren't we? With rapid transit and a route in Councillor Goss and David King's patch where there is potentially going to be a super fast bus there one day. It amazes me that at the turn of the 20th century, you could get an electric bus from North Station down to the Hive and over to Straight Road. Phenomenal. And I think that when we talk about an infrastructure deficit, the guys that built this place would just be losing their minds over where we've got to on some of the creaking infrastructure we have. But look, Middlewick is a problem. We know that Will Quince, our Member of Parliament, has taken this to the highest level of government, and he is in talks still with the MOD to try and get the site off the table. And it sounds like the room support him in that work. I certainly do. I don't know why on earth Middlewick was put in the plan. I rather suspect that politically, if the Labour group had been the largest group in here, perhaps it would have been the fields around Bullock Wood that would have been in the local plan instead. But we are where we are. This local plan was not the brainchild of me. It's a Lib Dem Labour local plan, and I think you guys are going to need to own it.
Thank you, Councillor Lawrence. Can I just address the meeting date? All group leaders were consulted about having a special meeting, as we usually do, to adopt the local plan, or have it as part of a normal business meeting where there would hardly have been any time for any other business to be discussed. So the group leaders were actually split on it, and so it is actually the decision of the Mayor in consultation with the Chief Executive, and so we decided that, as is usual, a special meeting to discuss the local plan was appropriate. So if that covers that, so please let's not have it mentioned again tonight. The next speaker is Councillor Dave Harris. Dave.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Good evening all. Interesting times. For me, as a boundary, I live within sight of Middlewick, 7 minutes walk. For me, it's a sad thing that the family silver, as I call it, the jewel in our crown in Middlewick, the government is hell-bent on selling it. I do not support building on this precious site. Stop the sale, stop the build has been our motto for a while. We, the people of Monkwick and surrounding area, have enjoyed flora, fauna and wildlife for years. So let's analyse some of the arguments about the local plan you've already heard tonight. I'm told to have we must have a local plan, as without one, we are risking something called a speculative developer. I couldn't find any on Google, but I'm sure they exist. My neighbourhood, my streets are already built on. There is very little space in the urban ward of Beerchurch for any speculative developer. So the only speculative developer I can see in the room is, guess what? the Ministry of Defence. I also heard people say that 1,000 is better than 2,000. Yes, I see what you're saying, but the MOD, as you've already heard tonight, Mr. Mayor, won't go away. I believe, as other people believe, they'll come back for another bite of the cherry. And I think the government should think again about that, and the residents very clearly suspicious about that weakness in that plan. I feel the same as my neighbours. They don't want it built on. My family doesn't want it built on. My friends say don't want it built on. So I just want to pass very quickly, while I've got a minute spare, the mitigation master plan. Turning to that, I'm told that that will protect and give infrastructure to mitigate the effects of 1,000 homes. Yeah, right. Of course not. I can list 3 housing estates that were built in the last few years in my own ward, where the army sold off in the early 2000s and just before for garrison development. Built with roads so narrow, parked cars have to put a wheel on the pavement for other cars to pass. Did those estates get community centres? No. Better roads? No. My fear is the MOD will pay lip service to the NECBTC master plan, as their profit margin will be affected by it. So all I believe the master plan will get is a document that says, please get people to walk, bus and cycle. Great motives, but it's not happening. I do not believe government will ever put enough infrastructure in to compensate for what is lost. I cannot support the local plan with Middlewick in it, and won't. Figures say that 40% will be built on and 60% unbuilt. Well, if you believe that, that's fine. I say stop the sale, stop the build. Middlewick, wrong place to build on. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Harris. Next speaker is Councillor William Sunnox. Councillor Sunnox, please.
Thank you. There are many things I don't like about this local plan. I don't like the way it tries to freeze growth in the rural economy, or the way it plants large new housing estates on the edge of Colchester, which have no more chance of generating the supporting infrastructure than their predecessors. I support those who oppose building on the Middlewick Ranges. But the fact is, we need a plan. Without one, we risk losing control of the future. If you're contemplating voting against, please think carefully. Are you looking at the big picture, or are you basing your decisions on one aspect you don't like? Would you knock down your whole house because of a bleeping smoke detector? I just might, incidentally, but that's another matter. I hate the things. More seriously, have you got a sensible alternative strategy? Do you want your council to be on the naughty step and possibly deprived of its planning powers? If you have a credible alternative, we should listen, but the alternatives we've heard are risky, and I don't think anyone has thought them through. I have a special message for those opposed to Middlewick. If the plan is adopted, please don't give up. It's not the last chance. You, or rather we, should take a forward-looking approach which concentrates on the economics rather than the politics. This is the area of my expertise, and I think that the MOD may be chasing a 35 million pot of gold that simply isn't there. I invite the council leadership to promise today to do 3 reasonable things to address your concerns. And they are reasonable things, and I hope that we will hear some of the senior members confirming it. First of all, they need to show resolve in implementing the 4 pages of tough conditions which relate specifically to Middlewick in the plan. The inspector has given us a lot to go on, and I think the site's a nightmare for a developer. Second, compile the infrastructure shortfall inventory that we've asked for, and that will then feed into the whole economics of Middlewick. And thirdly, start to apply the planning guidance on viability properly. So far as I'm aware, Colchester has yet to push a developer hard enough for a published appraisal to be produced. Other councils do it, and we should do it too. We're far too soft. I'm convinced that this economic approach, removing the pot of gold, will be every bit as effective as a legal one and will provide the community with a constructive way forward. Oh, and don't worry too much about the housing numbers. If the council takes a very slightly more liberal approach to implementation, there will be plenty of windfall to make up for the Middlewick shortfall. As a result, I believe that growth in the borough will be more balanced, community-based and attractive. So please, let's get the plan adopted. It's been seven years and it's time. I'm convinced we can make it work if we focus on the future, not the past.
Thank you, Councillor Sonox. Next speaker is Councillor Leslie Scott-Butel, please. Leslie.
Thank you. Thank you. I speak on behalf of all Stanway Ward residents. At the last full council meeting to adopt the local plan, I abstained from the vote, being aware that more housing wasn't required generally, though importantly, I felt that Stanway had already taken enough. Private open spaces have been lost, and residents who lived on the outskirts of the village found themselves no longer living on the edge of Stanway, but with development either opposite or behind them. I am aware that sites in Stanway that already have outline planning approval could submit another application, and crucially, if there is not a local policy in place, it would be considered in relation to the NPPF. There would be no site-specific requirements. Regrettably, Stanway has no neighbourhood plan in place at this time. In addition, sites with outline planning permission across the borough are estimated to include 30% of affordable housing. However, if the local plan is not adopted, the affordable housing policy, as Martin Goss said, will reduce to 20% by best estimation. I will be supporting and voting for the local plan tonight for one very simple, very clear reason: to protect my residents from further speculative development and to stop potential overdevelopment of sites with outline permission. Any development that endangers the availability of crucial green open space is the development agreed with obvious regret. It is clear, though, that checks and balances need to be carefully considered, and the risks involved in not voting the local plan through tonight are far too evident and clear. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Scott-Butel. Our next speaker is Councillor Roger Mannion. Roger.
Thank you, Mayor. I represent a predominantly rural community, which is well on the periphery of CBC. In fact, there's a large sector of green belt land, and we're almost an island, separated. We have a strong emerging neighbourhood plan, and likewise, we need a strong, coherent local plan in Tiptree. Unfortunately, this plan is not either of these. It is centre-centric, with little advantages to the rural communities. I don't really want to discuss how we got into this situation, because it looks like a mess to me, but then with my limited experience, I can't really comment about history. However, Middlewick certainly is a disaster for this community, for the local residents, for the environment, for the livestock, the animal stock, the information, the people and everybody else who lives in that area. It's been suggested that having 1,000 homes on the site is a good job. It's been done well. Yeah, okay, possibly. The truth of the matter is there is no need for any of those homes on that site. We are well within our housing numbers, and if MOD was refused planning permission, would they win on appeal? I think that is debatable. The loss of an environmental site which will never ever be available again, ever again, for what? Money, I guess. I cannot support this plan. However, because of the interest of Tiptree and my residents and their worries about overdevelopment, I can't vote against it. If I did, it would threaten Tiptree with a disaster. So reluctantly, Mr. Mayor, I must abstain. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mannion. Next councillor is Councillor Michelle Burrows. Michelle.
Thank you, Mayor. Having listened very carefully to all debates about the adoption of Section 2, I feel very much that the decision we are here to make tonight is between a rock and a hard place, neither decision being a comfortable one by any means. There will undoubtedly be an undeniable loss in terms of the environment, a loss of acid grassland and environmental biodiversity, and an increase in traffic with all the inherent air pollution. There is also a mental health and well-being loss too, for residents who use this space on a daily basis. And all the speakers this evening have made very thorough and salient points which make this decision even harder. Recently, in Wivenhoe, we were faced with a planning application from Taylor Wimpey that went against our neighbourhood plan. Their planning application proposed that 29% of their development would be outside of the agreed site. The in-house CBC urban planner himself said that their plans were lacking in blue-green infrastructure. The plan showed lack of recognition to the police national document about planning to design out crime. The Essex County Fire and Rescue Service had issues around lack of sufficient turning circles for their fire engines to access. The plans didn't have any one-bedroom properties, which it was clear through lots of resident engagement during the development of the neighbourhood plan that that was what was needed in Wivenhoe. Myself and my two colleagues, Councillor Mark Corey and Councillor Andrea Luxford-Vaughan, objected to the planning application as it went against our neighbourhood plan, and we won. We were able to win because we had a neighbourhood plan in place. Please bear with me. I agree with Sir Bob. We do have to try and protect what is left of our open spaces, but without a neighbourhood plan in place, my concern is that Colchester won't be protected. If we don't have a local plan, then we are open to speculative building, which could be and probably would exceed building on 40% of the WIC. One speaker this evening asked if there had been any speculative development, and I believe that there have indeed been two speculative developments that have won on appeal, and they weren't protected, these places, by a neighbourhood plan. I hear what Councillor Lissamore is saying when she says that she can't vote for a plan that damages the environment, and I beg your pardon if I haven't quoted you exactly, but I think, Councillor Lissamore, this is the tenet of what you were saying. There will be damage, but my biggest concern is that if we don't have the protection of a local plan, then we are lost. Damage could be uncontrollable. The updates to policies that Councillor Goss mentioned demonstrate some of the protection that we would have with a local plan. And finally, just to be clear, I haven't been told by anyone how to vote tonight. I'm voting for what I believe is best for my residents. That is some protection, not no protection. Thank you.
Thank you, Michelle. Next speaker is Councillor Mark Gocher.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. First of all, I want it to be put on record that I'm disappointed that a situation has arisen that there is 20% absence tonight, and that's not me blaming the people who are absent, but it is disappointing. In terms of the speakers we heard earlier, I'd like to thank everybody who has turned up this evening to have their say. And one thing really sticks in my mind, and it was said by Mr. Alan Short when he says we face an existential threat. That is what a climate and biodiversity emergency means, an existential threat. And we've heard a lot tonight from many speakers about the ecological importance of Middlewick Ranges. And I cannot support a local plan that has such a wildlife site at the heart of it. Now, of course, I know that the MOD wanted 2,000 houses originally. And what we would have all liked was the MOD to withdraw the sale. And I know that many of the councillors in the wards neighbouring Middlewick Ranges, along with our MP and many others, have campaigned for this. But the council signalled to the MOD that they were happy with 1,000 houses by putting it in the draft local plan. If we approve this tonight, we are signalling a second time to the MOD that we are happy with 1,000 houses on that site, regardless of what we do afterwards. And it will not stop at 1,000 houses. It doesn't elsewhere in these situations. Now, obviously, you may want to argue against me on that, challenge me, I welcome that, but I don't believe it. I also don't believe that most people will walk and cycle up Mersey Road. I wish they would, but we live in the real world. There'll be cars, and many more cars, on the most polluted well, part of it, the most polluted road in Colchester. So regrettably, I'm going to stick to my guns and vote against this. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Gocher. Next speaker, Councillor Paul Smith. Councillor Paul Smith.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. The choice we have tonight is not between a great local plan or even a good local plan, but it's between having a local plan and not having a local plan. And the consequences of us not having a local plan are devastating across the entire borough, because we lose all the protections for all the areas that are mentioned in a local plan. We lose all the advantages in terms of social housing, in terms of the policies that are in the plan. But it's not an easy decision. But councillors, we're not elected to make the easy decisions, because if they were easy decisions, you wouldn't need councillors. Anyone could make them. No, we have to look at the hard facts that we're facing tonight. And it is a difficult decision. And yes, it's tempting to kick the can down the road, to adjourn, to abstain, to hope that something might turn up. But actually, tonight is the night we have to make the decision. And for me, that decision is, do we want to protect those bits that are included in the local plan, including Middlewick, or do we want to allow the developers to choose where to deliver the housing in Colchester? And I was elected, yes, I was elected to protect the areas in Colchester. Now, I was very interested to hear the leader of the Conservatives suggest that it was due to my party's efforts that areas around Bullockwood were saved from development. I just wish they printed that in their election leaflets, because it would make life a lot easier. But no, what we really have to do tonight is to look at the cold facts. It's protection or no protection. And my vote will be for protection.
Thank you, Councillor Smith. Next speaker is Councillor Rees Smithson. Rees.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm honoured to be able to make my maiden speech on a subject that affects the entire borough. But before I talk about the local plan, I would like to take a couple of seconds to pay tribute to my predecessor, Councillor Derek Loveland, who served this council and the residents of Tiptree with such distinction. I am here to represent the residents of Tiptree, one of, if not the, most densely populated ward in the borough. To the residents of Tiptree, tonight's vote is not about the Middlewick Ranges, nor is it about the number of houses the council are required to build between now and 2033. For the residents of Tiptree, tonight's vote is about three things. One, control, making sure that this council retains control over development in the borough. Two, accountability, ensuring that this council can hold developers accountable to build the infrastructure needed to support development and population growth. And three, creating a legacy for our children and grandchildren by ensuring that the right sort of houses are built in the right places with the necessary infrastructure to allow them to live and work in the borough. As politicians, we are often guilty of short-termism, often thinking in election cycles rather than taking long-term strategic views. Tonight, though, we have the opportunity to take a long-term strategic view which will affect this borough for decades to come. A decision that cannot be reversed by the winner of the next election. It is never easy to vote for building on green spaces, or in my case, to vote for a plan that puts a minimum of 400 houses into Tiptree, which will increase its population by at least 10%. However, if we do not vote for this plan tonight, this council will lose control and the ability to hold developers accountable. If that happens, there is a possibility that untrammelled speculative development, which delivers the wrong type of housing and in the wrong place and without the supporting infrastructure, will follow. What sort of legacy would that be to leave our children and grandchildren? Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Smithson. Our next speaker is Councillor Adam Fox.
Thank you very much, Mayor. I'd like to begin by saying that the decision ahead of us to adopt a local plan or not is not easy, and nor is it one that any of us take lightly. And I pay tribute to those councillors who've shown the courage to attend tonight's meeting. The adoption of a local plan is not about just housing allocations, but also about areas that need to be protected, about policies on genuinely affordable housing and infrastructure and new environmental conditions. Developing a local plan is a hard process. And before we move on, I'd like to thank all those councillors that sat on local plan committees and officers who've worked so hard in developing a plan. On Middlewick, I genuinely fear even higher housing numbers. Developers often start with a number and then come back for more. The Ministry of Defence starting position was 2,000. Where else could it go? It would also, not having a plan would also leave other places in my ward at risk of speculative development. Places like Batterswick, which local councillors fought against with local residents, and we could do that precisely because we had a plan. There are many voices now who didn't join us in that fight. There are others who fought the Middlewick development on social media and in the press, while arguing for more housing at local plan meetings. Others, like Sir Bob Russell, have walked the site with planners, admitted that 1,000 houses will be built, and then played a different tune in public. And some people are being misled by people picking a line here or a line there in a legal document, and misled by people saying, don't play politics, who turn up later wearing a rosette of one colour or another. The only people who can make the final decision to prevent building on the Wick are the government, the Ministry of Defence. We've been let down, despite the local campaigns we've led to take Middlewick off the table and to stop the sale, stop the build. And I'll continue that fight with my ward colleagues. We'll push for an early review of the local plan to develop further restrictions and protections, including designation to protect the site in perpetuity, and other further mitigation we can find to enable residents to continue to use the green open space. It is positive that Save the Rangers group also recognises the additional requirements put in place by the inspector, and I believe that that makes it increasingly difficult to develop the site in any meaningful way. While others have taken the decision not to show up, I encourage those that are here to take the decision that Colchester is better off with a local plan than without one. It is not perfect, but without it, I fear applications for speculative development within days and weeks. It is a decision I have personally agonised over, but I will be voting in favour.
Thank you, Councillor Fox. Councillor Nissen, you can return to your seat, and Councillor Arnold, thank you. Can I see, we've got 4 speakers left. Can I see any other indications of councillors who want to speak? Councillor Willits. Councillor King and Councillor Jowers. You've got you, yeah. Anybody else? Yeah, I've got you. Okay, we've got all the others. So we've got 3 more. Okay, we will take a break in 10 minutes in that case. So the next speaker is Councillor Chris Pearson.
Thank you, Mayor. As Councillor Fox has already alluded to, this is probably the most difficult decision that I've had to make in my time as a Colchester Borough Councillor. I think it's probably one of the most difficult decisions that has faced us as a group of councillors. I think it was very disappointing that Middlewick was introduced so late into the draft plan. And I think that probably caught our members on the local plan committee and certainly local ward councillors by a bit of surprise. Because I don't think we fully appreciated exactly what the implications of introducing Middlewick to the local plan at that time were. I think it's very concerning that the council doesn't have its own in-house ecology expert who could have guided us, who could have explained to us at that time what the potential implications were. And I think it's unfortunate that we then relied on an external organisation to provide that advice about the site. The same organisation, or an arm of the same organisation, then provided an indication that was completely opposite to that advice. I also, many years ago, was a member of Essex County Council. And for a short period, I was leader of that authority at the time that local government reorganisation was occurring in the mid-90s. At that time, I thought it was absolutely critical that we ended up with most purpose authorities in Essex. And it's always perplexed me as a local borough councillor that I have so little say when it comes to road, highways, pavement matters. And frequently, Essex County Council Highways lets down this authority when it comes to planning decisions. And I think this has happened again here. The inspector was critical of the advice that was given by Highways initially on our local plan, especially around Middlewick. I also think it's extremely disappointing that despite the acres and acres of development that were previously under the control of the MOD, a significant part of which is actually in my Beerchurch ward, has been allowed to be developed already.
That's it, Councillor Pearson. Thank you very much. Next speaker is Councillor Steph Nissen. Steph, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. No one would dispute we're in a very difficult situation tonight with only bad options available to us. As has been noted, there's been years to change this, and it's fallen to lots of new and reasonably new councillors to have to make Sophie's choice. The easiest option politically for all councillors tonight would be to vote no. However, there's been a lot of discussion around the MOD's intentions tonight. Excuse me. I myself have lobbied the government to halt the sale of the Middlewick Ranges, writing to the MOD, DEFRA and Mr Gove. Only the MOD has responded to me at this stage. So I wish to quote some of their comments in the letter to me, if I may. The MOD understands the strength of feeling in areas impacted by the closure of military sites, particularly those which have a deep-rooted history within the local community. However, I am sure you can appreciate the MOD remains committed to making the right decisions to provide effective support to defence capabilities and best value for money for the taxpayer. In addition to this, the release of sites that the MOD no longer needs provides opportunities for alternative uses, resulting in regeneration, business growth and job creation. As you're already aware, Middlewick Ranges has been identified as surplus to military requirements. Once new enhanced range facilities are completed at nearby Fingering Hoe Ranges. In line with standard procedure, the MOD will be disposing of the site in accordance with MOD policy and HM Treasury guidelines in a way that achieves best market value for the taxpayer. Currently, all firing activity has ceased at Middlewick Ranges due to safety concerns for members of the public entering the open access range danger area. The range is not closed and could be reopened if required for operational purposes. The disposal of Middlewick and the move to Fingering Hoe Ranges removes any military firing from areas adjacent to residential developments. This reduces the level of noise complaints from residents and reduces the number of safety breaches and trespass incidents. I can confirm that the MOD is not going to be building houses on the site. MOD officials have designed a concept of how the site could be developed as part of the disposal process, in which the concept master plan suggests 60% of the allocated land for development will be green open space. Letter ends. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thank you, Steph. I'm going to take Councillor Julie Young's contribution and then I'm going to have a 15-minute break. All right, so Councillor Julie Young, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. During the past 24 years, I've been involved in some difficult decisions where tensions run high. The Travellers' site debate springs to mind. We had police in attendance that night. But unlike the other local authorities, we have always faced up to our obligations and done the right thing, even in the face of some fierce objections. Tonight, we face another difficult choice. Do we bend to public pressure and vote no? Some argue that we can choose to delay or indeed start again. But our experienced officers warn us that we couldn't meet the 2023 deadline if we did. It's been a long 5 years in the making where members of the public have had the chance to be involved. In the early days, the garden communities were in sharp focus, and those councillors most opposed to West Tay focused their attentions there. Councillors currently hailed as heroes were at the time suggesting building on the brownfield site of Middlewick, preferable to developing greenfield sites. So weighing up the options before us tonight, we have to consider carefully what's at stake. We have 3,000 people on our housing waiting list. With the plan, we have 30% affordable housing. Without a plan, we stick at 20%. With the plan, we get 1,000 houses at Middlewick. Without the plan, this could be 2,000 houses or more. With the plan, we have policies in place to deal with climate change and sustainability. Without the plan, we have none. With a plan, we can use resources to work towards a better future. Starting again will cost the authority 4 million. With the plan, we control development to ensure infrastructure and amenity needs are met. Without a plan, it's a free-for-all. I put it to you, members. Do you want to be in charge of future development in Colchester, or do you want to hand control to central government? We are already seeing the consequences near neighbours face at Uttlesford and Basildon of not adopting a local plan. We have a broken planning system, but we have to make the best of it. No one wants to see overdevelopment. 920 houses per year is considered too many. If we start again, housing numbers immediately jump to 1086. There isn't a member here who wants to build on Middlewick, I am sure of it. But it's too big a gamble to vote no tonight. Yes, you would be hailed as a hero tonight, but that glory would be short-lived and the public will face disappointment down the line when houses get built there anyway. The Labour group have persistently backed the plan to persuade the MOD to stop the sale and gift the land to the people of Colchester. We will continue to pursue this plan. But tonight, Mr. Mayor, I will be voting for the adoption of the local plan and urge others to do the same. Voting no means we have no plan. It's as simple as that.
Thank you, Councillor Young. Right, I am going to adjourn the meeting there and we will reconvene at 7:45. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Please resume your seats. I've got 4 more speakers, but I do just have to tell you that Councillor Nissen has been taken ill and has had to go home or go to hospital. If we get any updates, we'll let you know. I'm sure we all send her our best wishes. We have 4 more speakers. Are there any other indications of councillors who wish to speak in the debate? Okay, well, I'll ask again after these 4 have spoken, and we commence with Councillor Dennis Willits, please. Dennis.
Thank you, Mayor. This evening, I would suggest we have a very simple choice before us. It's either approve a local plan or reap chaos, planning chaos onto this borough. Now, listening to the speeches this evening, Mr. Mayor, it sounds as though we're almost a council of fence sitters who've suspended our critical faculties for the evening. Everyone seems to be dodging the difficult decision, and I certainly don't see it as a difficult decision. We have to have a local plan. I think we regret, Mr. Mayor, that we have lost valuable land, open spaces. We've lost farmland. We've lost delightful country walks over the years as the housing programme have encroached on the parts of the borough. And I think it will be the same with Middlewick. Be it farmland lost in Stanway by the hundreds of acres, small amounts of farmland lost in 2 of the villages that I represent, West Burgolt and 8 Ash Green, where the local community were quite willing to look at the housing need and balance that against the loss of valuable land. But life is full of difficult choices, Mr. Mayor, and we have to make those difficult choices, not avoid them, not even say that we're trying to avoid them when we know they have to be taken. I believe that a good planning system is a planning system which pushes the decisions down as far as possible towards the local people, which is why I've always been a fan of the neighbourhood plan. And we have many emerging and approved neighbourhood plans in the borough. What baffles me is why the area around Middlewick was never identified as a zone for a local plan, so that the local people could put in their view and actually model and shape the planning of their part of the town. Some people think of neighbourhood plans as being appropriate to the villages, but when we were looking at when I was looking at neighbourhood plans, I visited Milton Keynes, where the citizens of central Milton Keynes, the middle of a city, decided that they would take control of their own area and produce a neighbourhood plan which takes precedence over Milton Keynes Council's local plan. So I think it's a shame, having heard the heartfelt views of many people who are very worried about the future of Middlewick, that there was not a people power approach, a neighbourhood plan for the Middlewick area. But at the end of the day, Mr. Mayor, we have to have a local plan, and I will certainly be voting this evening for the local plan, albeit with a heavy heart, as many other members.
That's your 3 minutes. Thank you very much. Councillor Lee Scordis. Lee, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I'm really disappointed that we are in this situation. Disappointed that the Ministry of Defence decided to sell Middlewick Rangers. Disappointed that it was rushed upon us so quickly. Disappointed that we didn't take longer to evaluate the site and pushed it forward. Disappointed that Essex Highways keep approving sites like this, not taking into account the heavy traffic. Disappointed in so many aspects of what is such a vital part of my ward and Colchester, the largest green remaining space in the ward. I made a promise to my residents that I won't be supporting this plan, and I plan to stick to that. However, I'm in the quandary of, do I sit on my hands or do I vote against? And I've weighed it for weeks and months and looked at all the evidence of the dangers of voting against. And of course, I could do it to get a few cheers from people and for political reasons, but I certainly don't believe in deceiving my residents. And if they don't want to vote for me after, that is absolutely fine. I want to go out honestly. And from what I have seen from discussing with councillors in Uttlesford who don't have a local plan, a resident who used to live in Braintree who got in touch with me, not having a local plan is an absolute disaster. Uttlesford voted in new councillors to vote down a local plan. They still ended up with the expansion of Stansted and a huge legal bill in the millions that could be spent on residents and the cost of living crisis and so forth. So this is one of the toughest decisions I've had to make. The student protester in me wants to obviously vote against, to go knocking on the door of the MOD and bring residents with me and set up a picket and so forth. But we have to be realistic where we are. And there are aspects of looking at damage limitation here. If the worst comes to the worst and we find no way of stopping build here, do we look at 1,000 and push for a country park, or do we look at more than 2,000, the MOD trying to increase the value? What I do want is, because we all seem to agree that Middlewick shouldn't be built on or should be protected in some aspect, I want an agreement from everyone in this room that we will do our utmost to make sure as much of that land is protected by either a country park or a local nature reserve, to make sure that there is green space for people in my ward and make sure that they do not exceed this 1,000 homes. We have to do everything we can to stop the sale, but if we end up in that predicament, let's do everything we can to preserve as much as we can of this brilliant site.
Thank you, Councillor Scordis. The next speaker is the Deputy Mayor, Councillor John Jowers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Mayor. And I wasn't going to speak, but I think I have to really, because it was me to blame. I started the local plan panel. I think I had Mr. Weavers there as my amanuensis. And if you think this is a bad meeting or a difficult meeting or the most important meeting, well, think again. The Travellers site, this place had 400 people in it. And it was a split vote, and it was mine, was the casting vote. This has nothing like that at all. It is a case that if we do not do this plan, everyone loses. Because you think that they wouldn't appeal? You think that the developers wouldn't, or the MOD wouldn't appeal? Of course they would. I know all of you will have read the levelling up agenda coming out. Preference being given to those sites which are of national institutions. That's the MOD. Just think about it. And we're not talking just about Monkwick tonight. We are talking about the whole of this city borough. I've just seen an appeal lost in Mersey, thank goodness. The mayor helped me many years ago, he doesn't know it, but he did, in getting the numbers from 350, proportionally massive, down to 200. Application made for another 56, turned down because of the emerging local plan. What happens if we don't have one? Freedom Hall for speculative developers. Tiptree saw it. When we fell below the numbers in reserve, you saw it. I can see Roger nodding and I can see Reece nodding. It gives us protection. And my role is not just to represent Mersey, it is to represent the whole of Colchester. And this gives us protection. And just as a matter of interest, largest site, I think I remember many years ago when I was leader of this council, we bought Cymbeline Meadows. And I think that Councillor Scord is a brave man because he's absolutely right. We've got it down from 2,000 to 1,000. Stick at that, get the best country park you can. And if they do start to look at the blue section up to Weir Lane, get the same again or stop them. But if we do not have this, where will those houses go? That's the question, particularly for rural wards. But it would be Liberty Hall for speculative development. Vote for the local plan.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And our final speaker, unless I see any more indications, are there any more? Councillor Kirkby-Taylor now on the list. Anybody else? Okay, Councillor David King, Leader of the Council, please.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Thank you, Deputy Mayor. That was, to my ears, very well said. I mean, the beginning of this was before my time. It shows you how long all this takes. Worth bearing in mind when we talk about we can all do it again by the end of next year. Not a chance. But whether it was before our time in here or not, it's finishing. It has to finish on our watch. And I think we have to sort of dismiss, when we think about this and make a decision, some of the emotional charge, which is very understandable, but which starts to separate some of us. Those who care about the environment and those who don't. It's not that simple. I doubt there's any in here who don't care a great deal about Middlewick, don't care a great deal about the pleasures of being outside, but it's not about that. This is about the whole picture for this borough, this city. We've got to make a decision for everybody, not for the whole. And I have to say this, Darius, we've got to do this cross-party as much as we can. This local plan, wherever its genesis, will be here for all of us and for all of the people that we're here to represent. So for me, what drives me are the facts. So this has gone through an independent review. It's been given real test. All the issues that have been repeatedly raised have been gone through exhaustively, and we have the recommendations of that before us. And for me, it's a credibility piece as a local authority. And for us as councillors, that we look at that big picture, we take the responsibility not just for our ward, and I understand that, we take our responsibilities in the whole. And we take, as several have said, we take the uncomfortable decisions. We're not taking them lightly, but we do them, we take them because of the consequences of not doing it. And one classic one that nobody's talking about is if we do not do this, the number of houses that have to be found and developed increases each and every year. That is not something that anyone would normally argue for, but by silence and opposition, that's what we do. It's not about waiting for local government reform. We can't embarrass the MOD into being different from what they are. I know them from the inside out. It's about looking after the whole of the borough. So Tiptree, Mersey, Wivenhoe, the rural wards, the pockets of land in and outside of the town, which can be developed badly as an alternative to developing as well as we can within tight constraints and conditions. Last thing for me, several members here have said, Councillor Sunnock's amongst them, that we should make the best bargain we can, have the tightest controls we can, and commit ourselves to following through, including a country park. Absolutely. We have to do this, in my view, we absolutely do have to do this, then we do so with the best spirit cross-party. We look after the best of the environment we have. We restrict the number of houses. We make sure we follow through of the promises and the protections of this local plan.
Thank you, Councillor King. Thank you. And our final speaker, unless I get a late indication from any other member, Councillor Richard Kirkby-Taylor, please.
Thank you. I did have my hand up earlier, but clearly it was hidden behind Councillor Mannion, so I apologise for not waving vigorously enough. Yeah, for me, there is no real choice or decision to be made here tonight. It's just a matter of weighing up the risks versus the benefits and deciding which is the least damaging option. Rejecting a local plan is going to leave the future of Colchester in the hands of developers, and I just want to say it was the greed of developers that led to Grenfell. Whoever buys the site from the MOD will put profit before people or the environment, and imagining otherwise is naivety. Any scenario in which developers willing to build on the Wick with the restrictions in the local plan will do so, and they will build twice as fast and twice as many houses if those restrictions are removed. We lost this battle to have the Wick out of the local plan over 2 years ago. We have to focus our energy on finding a way of modifying or adapting the adopted local plan and remove the WIC from it or stop the sale. That is our only option here. It's not going to be easy or cheap, and it will probably result in more houses overall, but I am assured it is possible to do this. It is, on balance, my opinion, that it would be ecocide and greenwash of the worst kind to throw the local plan out in the vain hope that we can rely on the kindness and the generosity of developers across the entirety of our borough to help protect us from the existential threat that is the climate emergency. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kirkby-Taylor. Councillor Goss, you have 3 minutes in which to sum up.
I could probably take 3 hours to sum up, but 3 minutes is all I have. There's been some very passionate speakers from members of the public, and we want to thank everyone that's come along tonight to speak, because every voice is valid. But we have a really, really difficult decision to make. Do we adopt the local plan, or do we open ourselves up and risk development from anybody, anywhere in Colchester? And I think Councillor Jowers summed it up well. We represent all of Colchester tonight, not just our wards. We are looking at the holistic approach and the risks. There are huge risks if we do not adopt this local plan. And having been through this process twice now in 14 years that I've been on this authority, I can tell you that it is risky if we have no local plan. It's as simple as that. We have out-of-date policies. That is why we need to adopt it now, not wait till 2023. And that's a central plank of the National Planning Policy Framework, that in appeals, if our own local policies are out of date, it means an appeal is more likely to be upheld. It's as simple as that. So Middlewick Ranges has dominated the discussions. That's why I made sure we talked about policies tonight, because it's not just about sites or one specific site, but yes, it's an important site. And the inspector has absolutely wrapped Middlewick up in 4 pages of conditions that if they are not met, as a planning authority, we can throw it under the bus. It's as simple as that. And I think Councillor Sunnox summed up 3 very good points. He summed up these 4 pages. Show resolve. Throw it out if a developer cannot meet that test or those tests. Shortfall of infrastructure. We're doing that work now to look at the shortfalls across Colchester, and also looking at the appraisals of planning applications as well, to do more work. I have no problems with anything that Councillor Sunnox has raised. I think it's eminently sensible. But we have a decision to make in less than a minute's time when I've stopped speaking and summing up. It's either we risk development, we risk 2,000 houses at Middlewick and 80% of that land is built on, or we try and do development to the best of our ability to all these new policies and what the planning inspector has given us in terms of protection, to try and do it as best we can, involving the community in that master planning process and saving 60% of that land for a public country park, which will form part of that master plan. My plea to everyone that doesn't want this, get involved in that master plan. If we adopt the local plan, please get involved in the master plan and influence it and drive it as a local community. It's now over to you, councillors, to do the right thing and to do what we need to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Martin Goss. And that concludes the debate. We'll now move to the vote.
Mr. Mayor, named vote if we can.
Have you got 2 supporters? You've got more than 2. Okay. We'll have a named vote. Mr. Weavers will explain the process.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Okay, we're now going to move to a named vote on the motion to adopt Section 2 of the local plan. Councillor Arnold.
4.
4. Councillor Barton.
4.
4. Councillor Bloomfield.
4.
4. Councillor Burrows.
4.
4. Councillor Chua.
4.
4. Councillor Corey.
4.
4. Councillor Cox.
4.
4. Councillor Fox.
4.
4. Councillor Gocher.
Against.
Against. Councillor Goss.
4.
4. Councillor Harris.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Hogg.
4.
4. Councillor King.
4.
4. Councillor Kirkby Taylor.
4.
4. Councillor Jocelyn Law.
4.
4. Councillor Darius Laws.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Lilly.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Lissimore.
Against.
Against. Councillor Jackie McLean. 4. Councillor Mannion.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor McCarthy.
Against.
Against. Councillor Sam McLean.
4.
4. Councillor Moore.
4.
4. Councillor Pearson.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Rippingale.
4.
4. Councillor Scordis.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Scott Boutell.
4.
4. Councillor Smith.
4.
4. Councillor Smithson.
4.
4. Councillor Spindler.
Against.
Against. Councillor Sunnox.
4.
4. Councillor Tate.
Against.
Against. Councillor Warnes.
Abstain.
Abstain. Councillor Willits.
4.
4. Councillor Wood.
4.
4. Councillor Julian.
4.
4. The Deputy Mayor.
4.
4. And the Mayor.
4.
4. Thank you. The result of the vote is 26 for, 5 against, 7 abstentions. Mr. Mayor, the motion is carried.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, councillors. That concludes the meeting. Have a good journey home.